The envelope had no name on it. Just a black card, a number, and 4 words that made Celine's stomach drop. She was the bride. She stood in the middle of the penthouse. The same penthouse where she had spent 6 weeks measuring curtain drops and tasting cake samples and asking about a woman she had never met, and her hands would not stop shaking. The invitation she had designed herself was open on the table. Ivory cardstock, gold foil edges, every detail chosen by her own hand. And her name was printed inside it. Hello family, welcome back. Please hit subscribe and give this video a thumbs up, it really supports our channel. Don't forget to share with your friends and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a new story. And please tell us in the comments where you're watching from. Now sit back, relax, and enjoy the story. Seline Bello had one rule and she had never broken it. Build the day. Never become part of it. 12 years in the events industry had taught her that feelings were expensive. She had watched planners fall in love with clients, mistake late-night calls about centerpieces for something deeper, and end up devastated when the wedding happened and they were still just the person who arranged the chairs. She ran Premier Touch events out of a clean, modest office in Victoria Island, Lagos. No partners. No staff beyond one part-time assistant. Just her discipline, her eye for detail, and a reputation that corporate Lagos passed around in hushed, respectful tones. So when a black envelope arrived on her desk on a Wednesday morning with a number that made her coffee go cold, she told herself it was just another job. The card inside was brief. Private wedding. Full creative control. 6 weeks. Confidential. The budget figure at the bottom had no business existing. She counted the zeros 3 times. She called the number that afternoon. The voice that answered was calm in a way that felt deliberate. Not cold. Just contained, like a man who had learned long ago that words cost something. He introduced himself as Roland Adeyemi. He needed a wedding designed in 6 weeks. The guest list was small, 30 people maximum. The ceremony would be held in Abuja. The bride had very particular taste. I'll need to meet the bride, Seline said immediately. A beat of silence. That won't be possible yet. Mr. Salami, I don't design weddings without speaking to both parties. That is not how I work. I know how you work, he said simply. I read everything about you before I called. I need someone who understands that a wedding is not a performance. I need someone who builds meaning, not decoration. Another pause. That is you. Seline tapped her pen against her notebook. And the bride. She will be involved at the right time. It was the strangest answer she had ever received. It should have ended the call. Instead she heard herself say, "Send me the contract." She told herself it was the money. She knew even then it was the curiosity. The first meeting was in a penthouse in Maitama, Abuja. Roland Adeyemi was standing at the far window when she arrived, the city quiet and gray behind him in the early morning light. He was not what she expected. He was perhaps 35, lean and unhurried, with the kind of stillness that powerful men either practiced or were simply born with. He turned when she entered and looked at her the way people look at something they have been thinking about for a long time. They shook hands. His grip was brief and firm. Seline opened her notebook. Tell me about the bride, she said. Her taste. What she values. What she absolutely cannot stand. Roland looked at her for 1 second longer than necessary. Then he said, she believes a wedding should feel true. Not grand. Not impressive. Just completely honestly true. She would rather have 10 people who mean something than 300 who were invited out of obligation. Seline wrote it down. She sounds like someone I'd respect, she said without looking up. I think you would, he said quietly. She did not notice the way he said it. She was already sketching. But if the bride had such specific taste, why had she never once shown up? The second week changed something and Seline could not name what. It was not dramatic. There was no single moment she could point to and say, that is where it shifted. It happened the way the harmattan changes the air in Abuja, gradually, almost without permission, until one morning you simply notice that something is different and has been for a while. Roland was always present for their meetings. Not just physically, actually present. He listened to her the way most clients listen to their phones. When she spoke about floral arrangements or the emotional logic of a ceremony's timeline, he did not glaze over. He asked questions that proved he had been paying attention since the last time they spoke. You mentioned last week that the entrance should feel like an arrival, not an entrance, he said one morning, coffee untouched before him. What is the difference? Seline looked up from her fabric swatches. An entrance is about being seen, she said. An arrival is about coming home. She paused. A good ceremony makes the people inside it feel like they have arrived somewhere that was always waiting for them. Roland was quiet for a moment. That is exactly what I want. She told herself he was simply an attentive client. She had attentive clients before. She knew the difference between a man who listened because he cared about the wedding and a man who listened because he cared about the person talking. She had that rule for a reason. But the bride still had not called. Seline raised it again at the end of their third session. She set down her pen with quiet finality. To Benna. We are designing a wedding ceremony for a woman I have never spoken to. I have chosen her color palette. I have sketched her ceremony arch. I have drafted the vow structure. All without a single conversation with her. She kept her voice professional. This is unusual. I know, he said. It is more than unusual. It is a problem. He looked at her steadily. What if I told you that every choice you have made so far has been exactly right? I would say that is impossible without her input. And yet, he said simply. She stared at him. He did not look away. There was nothing challenging in his expression, just that quiet certainty that she had noticed from their very first phone call, the kind that did not argue because it did not feel the need to. Seline gathered her folders and told herself the money was worth the strange. But that night in her hotel room, she lay awake thinking about the way he had said exactly right, like a man confirming something he already knew, not discovering something new. The following session, something small happened that she would think about for days. She had arranged fabric samples across the long table and was explaining the difference between ivory and warm white in late afternoon light. She reached across for her color wheel and knocked her pen to the floor. Roland picked it up before she could move, and when he handed it back, his fingers were close to hers for just a moment. He did not make anything of it. He simply handed her the pen and returned his eyes to the fabric samples. But she noticed that she noticed. She pressed her hand flat against her notebook and kept talking. That was the thing about Roland Adeyemi. He never pushed. Never leaned in when she expected it, never said anything that crossed a line she could point to and name. He was simply, consistently, carefully present, in a way that asked nothing and somehow cost her everything to ignore. She called her friend Tonia that evening. The client is strange, she said. Strange how? Seline was quiet for a moment. Strange like he already knows things he shouldn't know yet. Tonia laughed. Seline. That is not strange. That is a man who is interested in you. He is a client planning a wedding. Tonia. I heard you, her friend said, still smiling through the phone. I just didn't agree. Seline ended the call and stared at the Abuja skyline outside her window, quiet, vast and full of questions she was not ready to ask. Why did everything she designed feel less like someone else's wedding and more like a dream she had never told anyone about? By the fourth week, Seline stopped pretending the job was ordinary. Not because anything inappropriate had happened. Nothing had. That was almost the problem. Roland Adeyemi was the most respectful client she had ever worked with, and somehow that respect had become the most unsettling thing in the room. He remembered everything. She had mentioned once, casually without thinking, that she found most wedding receptions too loud to feel meaningful. 3 days later, he had a sound engineer contact her about designing an acoustic environment that felt intimate rather than performative. She had said nothing about it at their next meeting. Neither had he. He had simply listened and acted without asking for credit. She caught herself looking forward to Tuesdays. Their sessions were always in the penthouse. Always morning. He ordered tea without being asked, the same kind she had accepted once on their first meeting and never mentioned again. The table by the window became their table. Her side, his side, papers and swatches and her open notebook in the middle. It felt, dangerously, like a routine that belonged to two people. She pushed through it. She was a professional. She designed the ceremony arch, clean white metal curved like a question mark, threaded with pale green leaves and a single variety of flower she had chosen because it meant chosen freely in the quiet language of botanists. She built the seating arrangement with the care of someone who understood that proximity at a wedding was its own kind of statement. Everything she touched felt personal. She told herself it was because she was good at her job. One Tuesday, Roland arrived later than usual. He sat down, looked at the progress spread across the table, and then looked at her in a way that was too direct to ignore. Can I ask you something that is not about the wedding? He said. Seline kept her eyes on her notebook. You can ask. Do you enjoy this? Not the work. This. He gestured, not at the papers but at the space between them. The building of something. She looked up slowly. I enjoy the work, she said carefully. That is not what I asked. The room was very quiet. Outside the window, Abuja moved through its morning, buses and distance and ordinary life, and inside the air held still like it was waiting. "Yes," she said finally. "I enjoy this." He nodded once as if she had confirmed something. He picked up a fabric swatch and asked a question about the reception tables, and the moment closed like a door swung gently shut. But she felt it for the rest of the day. That evening she did what she always did when her feelings became inconvenient. She applied logic. She sat at the small desk in her hotel room and wrote 2 columns in her notebook. What I know and what I am imagining. It was a trick she had developed years ago to separate fact from feeling. Under what I know she wrote, he is a client. There is a bride. I have never met her. He listens carefully. He is consistent. He has never once said anything I could call inappropriate. Under what I am imagining she wrote 1 word and then stared at it. Everything. She closed the notebook. She had built her entire career on the understanding that the most dangerous thing a wedding planner could do was forget which side of the ceremony she stood on. She stood on the building side. Always. That was the rule, and the rule had never failed her. But that night she dreamed about the ceremony arch she had designed. White metal and pale green leaves, and in the dream she was standing under it, and the person across from her had Tabena's hands and Tabena's stillness, and when she woke up she lay in the gray Abuja morning and did not move for a long time. She was not falling. She refused to be falling. But if she was only the planner, why did every single detail she chose feel like a confession? The invitation arrived on a Thursday, and it arrived by hand. A hotel concierge knocked on Celine's door at 7 in the morning with a flat ivory envelope and a polite expression that gave nothing away. She signed for it still in her robe, hair wrapped, coffee unmade. She recognized the envelope immediately. She had designed it herself. Ivory cardstock, 140 grams. Gold foil pressed along the edges. The typeface she had spent 40 minutes selecting because it was formal without being cold. She had approved the final print sample just 6 days ago and had felt quietly proud of how it turned out. She turned it over in her hands. Her name was on the front. Miss Seline Bello. Written in the same gold ink as the rest of the design. Not a courtesy copy. Not a vendor's invitation. Precise, deliberate, centered. The way a name looks when it has always been meant to be there. She opened it slowly. The card inside was exactly as she had designed it. Every word, every spacing decision, every detail she had labored over across 6 weeks of careful work. The ceremony date. The venue, a private garden in Abuja she had sourced and dressed herself. The time. And at the top, where the bride's name was printed in the largest text on the card, in clean and unmistakable letters. Seline Bello. She sat down on the edge of the bed because her legs made the decision before her mind could. She read it again. Then again. The words did not change. The name did not shift into someone else's. The card was real and solid and made of paper she had chosen with her own hands, and her name was on it, and she was the bride. She sat there for a long time without moving. Then something cold moved through the warmth she had been carefully managing for weeks. Because this was not a surprise. This was not a romantic gesture. This was a plan. A deliberate, constructed, months-long plan that she had been living inside without knowing it. Every meeting, every Tuesday morning, every cup of tea ordered without asking, every question that felt too personal for a client, all of it had been architecture. She had been designed into this wedding the same way she had designed everything else in it. She dressed quickly. She did not call ahead. The penthouse door was open when she arrived. Roland was standing at the window exactly as he had been on the very first morning, as if no time had passed, as if the whole world was the same as it had been then. He turned when he heard her, and his face did not perform surprise. He looked at her the way a man looks when he has been waiting for something difficult and is finally ready to meet it. She placed the invitation on the table between them. Face up. Her name visible. Explain this, she said. Her voice was steady. That steadiness cost her. Roland looked at the card, then at her. He did not look away. Sit down, Seline. I will stand. He nodded slowly, accepting that. He put his hands in his pockets and was quiet for a moment. Not stalling, she could tell the difference, just arranging words that mattered into the right order. I knew who you were before I sent that envelope, he said. I had read about your work. I had seen what you built for other people, and I understood something that I could not explain in a phone call or a first meeting. He paused. I knew that if I called you and said what I actually wanted, you would have refused before you ever gave me a chance. Celine's jaw tightened. So you deceived me. I gave you a room, he said quietly, and I waited to see if you would want to stay in it. The words landed somewhere she was not prepared for. She pushed past them. I designed another woman's wedding for 6 weeks, she said. I made choices for someone I thought existed. I invested. She stopped because the next word was myself and she was not ready to hand him that. Roland took one step toward her. Just one. Every choice you made was yours, he said. The arch. The flowers. The music. The 30 guests instead of 300. Every single thing you chose was what you believe a wedding should be. His voice was low and even. I did not guide you. I just watched you build something true. The room was completely silent. Seline picked up the invitation and held it without looking at it. She had a rule. She had always had a rule, and it had always protected her, and right now it felt like the only wall left standing in a building that had already changed its shape around her. You had no right, she said. No, he agreed. I didn't. And why, with everything she had every reason to feel, did the thing sitting heaviest in her chest feel less like anger and more like recognition? She left the penthouse without another word. She took the elevator down alone, walked through the quiet Maitama lobby, and sat in her car for 23 minutes without starting the engine. The invitation was on the passenger seat. She did not look at it, but she was aware of it the entire time, the way you are aware of something that has permanently changed the shape of a room. Her phone rang twice. She did not answer. She drove back to her hotel, ordered food she did not eat, and sat at the small desk where 6 days ago she had written 2 columns in her notebook, what I know and what I am imagining. She opened to that page and stared at the single word she had written under imagination and then refused to finish. She picked up her pen and this time she did not stop herself. She wrote everything she actually knew about Roland Adeyemi across 3 pages, the way she would assess any project. Factually, methodically, without sentiment. Not what she felt. What she had observed. What had actually happened between them across 6 weeks of Tuesday mornings and careful conversation. He had never lied about who he was. When she asked questions he answered them directly. When she set professional boundaries he respected them without comment. He had never once used his money as a lever, never reminded her of the contract, never made her feel that her position was conditional on anything other than her work. He had listened. Consistently. Without performance. He had created space and then stayed inside his half of it. She wrote it all down and then she sat back and read it and felt something complicated move through her, because the list did not read like a manipulation. It read like a record of someone being, with great patience and discipline, exactly who they said they were. That almost made it worse. Because the deception was real. She had spent 6 weeks designing a wedding she believed was for another woman. She had poured professional care and, she could admit it now, alone in this room, to no one but her notebook, genuine personal feeling into every detail. And that feeling had been drawn out of her under false pretenses, in a context she had not consented to. He had chosen for her before she could choose for herself. She called Tonia at midnight. He set the whole thing up, Seline said. The wedding was always mine. He hired me to plan my own wedding without telling me. Silence on the other end. Then Tonia said carefully, how do you feel? Angry. What else? Seline pressed her fingers against her eyes. Seen, she said quietly. Which makes me more angry. Tonia was quiet for a moment. There is a difference, she said finally, between a man who designs a trap and a man who designs a door. One locks behind you. The other, she paused. The other you can walk through or walk away from. Has he taken anything from you, Seline? Has he forced anything? Seline said nothing. Or did he just spend 6 weeks showing you who he was and hope that you would notice? She ended the call and sat with the dark in the question. In the morning she did something she had not done in 12 years of professional life. She went back through every decision she had made on this wedding, not as a planner reviewing her work, but as a person examining her own honesty. The intimate guest list. The ceremony arch that curved like a held breath. The flowers that meant chosen freely. The vow structure she had drafted that said nothing about possession and everything about presence. The music she had selected. Quiet, unhurried, the kind that did not ask you to feel something but simply made room for whatever you already felt. She had not designed a wedding. She had designed a truth. And the most frightening thing, the thing she sat with all morning in that hotel room while Abuja moved outside her window in its ordinary indifferent way, was that not one single detail made her want to undo it. She was still angry. That was real and she would not dismiss it. But underneath the anger, deeper and quieter and far more inconvenient, was something that had been building since the first Tuesday morning she had walked into a penthouse and met a man who listened like listening was the most important thing he could do. She picked up the invitation from where it had sat untouched on the desk since the night before. She read her own name in gold foil and felt for the first time, something other than shock. She felt the weight of being chosen first. Quietly. Without leverage. before she could be useful or impressive or anything other than simply herself. She had spent 12 years building other people's most important days and had never once asked herself what her own might look like. She already knew the answer. She had designed it with her own hands. The only question left was whether she was brave enough to walk into what she had already built. She arrived at the penthouse on a Saturday morning without an appointment. Roland opened the door himself. He was in a simple white shirt, no jacket, and he looked like a man who had not slept well but had made peace with that. He stepped back without a word and let her in. The penthouse was different. The work table was cleared. No swatches, no floor plans, no open notebooks. Just the wide Abuja morning coming through the glass and the two of them standing in a space that had held 6 weeks of something neither of them had named out loud. Seline did not sit. She stood in the middle of the room and looked at him directly. "I am still angry," she said. "I need you to understand that before anything else. What you did was a decision you made alone about my life without asking me. That is not small. I will not pretend it is small." Roland held her gaze. "I know. You took away my choice at the beginning so that I could have it fully at the end. That is a justification, not an apology. I need you to know the difference." "You are right," he said quietly. "There is no version of what I did that does not begin with me deciding something for you. I cannot undo that. I would not insult you by pretending I can." Seline was quiet for a moment. She had rehearsed this. She had sat in her hotel room until 3 in the morning with her notebook open and her thoughts in careful order because she was a woman who did not walk into important rooms unprepared. "Tell me why," she said. "The real reason. Not the careful version." Roland was still for a long moment. Then he moved to the window and stood with his back half turned, looking at the city the way a person looks at something when the truth is easier to say without full eye contact. "Every person who has ever wanted to be close to me," he said slowly, "wanted something that came with me. The money, the access, the name. I do not say that with pride. I say it because it became impossible to know. Even with good people. Even with genuine people." He paused. "I read about you because someone mentioned your work. Then I could not stop. The way you talked about ceremonies in that interview, that a wedding should be honest or it should not happen at all." He turned to look at her. "I thought that is a person who would never pretend. And I thought if I called her as myself, as Roland Adeyemi of Caldwell-Adeyemi Group, she would spend the whole time seeing the building instead of the man inside it." The room was very quiet. "So I built a context," he continued, "where the only thing visible was who I actually was. How I listened. What I valued. How I treated the person across the table from me." His voice dropped. "I needed you to know me before you knew what I was worth. Because I have never had that. Not once." Seline felt something move through her chest. Not softness, not yet, but understanding. The deep, uncomfortable kind that arrives when someone else's wound makes sense against your own. She thought about her rule. Build the day. Never become part of it. She had built that rule out of protection. Out of years of watching herself almost disappear into other people's joy and deciding, quietly and firmly, that she would rather be safe than seen. Roland had built his plan out of the same material. Fear dressed up as strategy. Longing disguised as architecture. They had both in their own way been hiding. She crossed the room and stopped 2 feet from him. "I designed that wedding," she said. "Every detail. With full honesty before I knew it was mine." She held his gaze. "The arch. The flowers. The 30 people who actually matter. The vows that are about presence, not ownership." She paused. "That is what I believe marriage should be. And I built it. It already exists." Roland watched her with the careful stillness she had come to know as his version of holding his breath. "I am not saying yes because I was moved by a gesture," she said. "I am not saying yes because the wedding is already planned or because the invitation has my name on it." Her voice was steady and clear. "I am saying yes because I spent 6 weeks watching you be the same person every single Tuesday. Consistent. Honest. Careful with me in a way that cost you something." She lifted her chin slightly. "That is evidence. And I trust evidence." Something changed in Tabena's face. Not dramatically, just a quiet release like a door finally settling into its frame after years of being slightly wrong. "Yes to what, exactly?" he asked softly. Seline almost smiled. "Yes to being known. Yes to showing up on that date, in that garden, in front of those 30 people." She tilted her head. "Yes to the man who ordered my tea without being asked and never once asked for credit." He reached out slowly and she let him take her hand. The ceremony happened the following Saturday in the garden she had sourced and dressed herself. 30 guests sat in chairs she had arranged. The arch she had built curved white and quiet above them, threaded with pale green leaves and flowers that meant chosen freely. Everything was exactly as she had designed it. Except this time she was not standing on the building's side. She walked in wearing ivory, a color she had instinctively pulled from her own wardrobe the morning of, without realizing until she was dressed that it matched the cardstock she had chosen for the invitations weeks ago. Roland stood at the end of the aisle and watched her arrive. Not enter. Arrive. The way she had always said a ceremony should feel, like coming home to a place that was always waiting. When she reached him, he said nothing dramatic. He simply looked at her the way he had looked at her on the very first morning, in this same city, in a penthouse full of potential, like a man confirming something he had quietly believed for a long time. The officiants spoke. They said their vows, the structure Seline had written herself, the words about presence and not possession, about choosing daily and not just once. She had written them for a bride she thought was a stranger. Every word fit perfectly. Afterwards, when the small garden was warm with the kind of quiet joy that does not need volume to be real, Seline stood with her husband and looked at the space she had built and finally understood what she had been designing all along. Not someone else's beginning. Her own. We've come to the end of today's story. I hope it touched your heart. Thanks for watching and staying with us till the end. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more inspiring stories. See you in the next one. And tell us in the comments, where are you watching from?